of you have come to this part of proceedings via the Naked Truth, which essentially was a narrative about the Australian dream and why sticking to that quote-unquote the Australian dream might not actually be the most productive, the most beneficial, or the most expedient way of getting to a point in your life where you don't actually have to worry about money anymore. You don't have to worry about rising costs. You don't actually have to worry and stress about that stuff, because you can learn to do something completely different than what most people learn over their lifetimes. But it is a program of learning. And so today and tomorrow, so there's two economies. One's based on consumption and the other one is based on enterprise. And so if you think about, well, okay, what happens if you remain a worker and you remain pointing your talent and your skill into the consumption economy? What actually happens? Well, let's just pull out and let's observe what happens for most people. So for most people, if you're an Australian, you'll spend around about 116% of every dollar that you earn over your lifetime. For Americans, it's about 126% of every dollar they earn over their lifetime. In other words, you work really, really hard, you generate 2 or 3, maybe even 4 million over your lifetime, but somehow it all gets consumed in a way that never allows you to be financially free. You can become really clever with what you can do with words. You can become really clever with what you can do with music. You can become really clever with what you can do with images. You can become really clever with what you can do with, let's say, technology. But that's where the real power is. The real power is in you becoming really clever with this thing called money. Right now, we're just consumers because that's the automatic default behavior. So if you're struggling with time, if you're struggling with this sense of not enough freedom, not enough money, not enough time, then you've got to start questioning, well, what's the purpose of money for you? Literally. I mean, you've got to answer that question for yourself. What is the purpose of money for you, and how have you been conditioned to use it? Have you been conditioned to exchange it for goods and services that devalue as soon as you purchase them? Have you been conditioned to exchange your money for things that we could call intangible, which actually have no real value other than the experience they give you? Have you been conditioned to use money in order to buy you a feeling? You buy something new, you like it, you have this feeling, it fades, that feeling is no longer there, it's gone. Now you need to buy something else to give you that feeling again, which is probably what most people use money for. So rather than the feelings of freedom, they use it for the feelings of, I don't know, something else. So you just got to start thinking about what's the purpose of money for you and how have you been conditioned to use it. So to begin your journey towards financial freedom, it's really important that you understand the consumption economy's history. Did it just come about by accident? How is it actually, how is it designed? How is it maintained? How did it come into existence? How is it perpetuated? You know, is it a conspiracy? It's absolutely nothing like that. But it is a design process. So now we can actually have a look at how this social engineering or conditioning uses, what tools they have in their toolkit. How do they actually maintain this process of consumption for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? I mean, if you can keep and maintain a system, if you can engineer and maintain a system that everybody follows for, well, 97% of the population follow for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you've got to believe it's a pretty powerful system. And you've got to believe that most people don't actually even understand that it's a system, and most people don't even know what's going on, because if they were conscious of it, you'd start to question it, wouldn't you? You say, hey, Barleys, let's just pull back a bit. So we've got to understand the three very, very powerful psychological and emotional tools that the social engineers use to keep the consumption system in place. Because if the consumption system wasn't in place, the profit makers couldn't make their profits. So you've just got to understand it's a process. The first tool is a little bit of language, and it's called Conspicuous Consumption. And I'll explain what that actually means. The second tool is a philosophy of futility. And the third tool is called Affluenza. And we can actually have a look at each of these tools and see how they play out, what they mean, and how they're socially engineered into the consciousness of people. If you continue to use the tools of consumption, then your financial results actually can't evolve. They can't evolve past where they are now. And again, it's not right, wrong, good or bad. It's just that they can't evolve because you're using tools that don't allow you to evolve you. You're using tools that are designed to actually maintain this system, not tools that allow you to transcend that system instead of that flavour. It's absolutely right down to the nth degree. It's actually designed. But most people are not aware of it. He convinced people to feel good about displaying and owning. Remember what he's trying to do? He's trying to highlight your insecurities. If you feel good about what you display and what you own, and somebody else comes along with something a little bit better than that, do you now feel insecure? Because you're matching and comparing against an external reference process. So people feel good about displaying and owning consumer items, not just because you actually needed them, but just because you actually felt better for their ownership. Now, once you get locked into that process, you are gone. It's bingo. Okay? Until you decide to change it. It's just bingo. Now, can you change it? Of course you can. In 1947, Edward Bernays published an essay titled The Engineering of Consent, which he defined as the art of manipulating people. You can actually go and read that, just Google it and read it for yourself, to become highly susceptible to want things they didn't actually need. In other words, you don't need them for life sustenance. You need them to display, to show off to other people. He quickly gained recognition as the founding father of public relations and the chief architect of consumerism. He literally changed the importance of citizen to a country's economy, to the importance of consumer to a country's economy. And he was an American. What's the biggest consumer society culture in the whole world? America. Are we far behind? No. He was able to exploit and change people's spending habits and make them more susceptible to influences they just simply weren't aware of. Influences they weren't aware of. By using Freud's discoveries of these deep emotional drives, he turned his uncle's research into new ways of managing how crowds both thought, the information that they were supplied to then digest and think with, and then how people expressed those thoughts and ideas through emotions. By experimenting with the minds of the popular classes, he started to re-engineer and define ways to basically bypass the rational mind and to really get into those irrational decisions. One of his most successful experiments was to get women to smoke in public. And this was really quite a feat. Okay, any other questions? Except you make marker, of course. Any other questions? Okay, so let's have a break and we'll have a...